Dear students, today we talk with you about the next part of our medical lectures about health law and medical law. First of all, we should talk with you about the meaning of health law, and finding the meaning of this word, we can find out three different parts or the different variants of this term. So the first term, the first meaning of this term means that health law is the branch of law dealing with various aspects of healthcare, including the practices of caregivers and the rights of patients. The second variant and the second meaning, the second part of this term, is that the health law is federal, state, and local law rules, regulations, and other jurisprudence among providers, payers, and vendors to the health care industry and its patients. And the third one part is that health law is delivery of healthcare services, all with an emphasis and operations, regulatory, and transactional legal issues. So, as you can see from these three parts, we go from a different sides of viewing on this term, from legal, from medical, from social meanings. All of them are right, and all of them have a place to be in our system of understanding this term. So, as we talk about health law, we also should talk a bit about the history of this law. And we should see that historically this problem was on the standards of physicians, of their care, on their actions, of their way of care. Their conduct has usually been judged by comparing it with others of the physicians. Last time we talked with you about ethical norms, and that norms, ethical canons, or sometimes codes, generally focused on professional integrity and courtesies towards fellow physicians rather than on relationships with their parents. As you know, many of you heard about it. I even think that all of you heard about it. The Hippocratic Oath is the base of ethical canons in medicine, and it was like the first rule for regulating the relations between patients and their doctors. But of course, it was more like rules for doctors, not for their patients. So, in Hippocratic Oath, which was formulated in the 5th century before Christ, presumably by the ancient Greek physicians, Hippocrates was a notable exception, but its provisions were ascribed to be only a minority of Greek physicians. I mean that at that time it was just the local regulating, which can't be given to everybody and can be moved from that certain territory. At that time, it wasn't so popular like today, and even today, it's more like a moral rule, not like a legal position. If with which, if it's not be regulated, the person can be punished. So, and if we talk about Hippocratic Oath, to understand the situation, we will talk about ethical code, about the situation that it's ethical code attributed to the ancient Greek physicians, Hippocrates, adopted as a guide to conduct by the medical professions throughout the ages and still used in the graduation ceremonies of many medical schools. So as you see, as it's now used in just in graduation ceremonies, it's more like traditions, not like regulating of legal positions. Also, we'll should say about the ethics, moral philosophies, and about the situation that it's like the discipline concerned with that what is morally good or bad, right or wrong. As we talked already before with you, ethic norms, moral norms are just the norms of social rules, not the legal norms. This term is also applied to any system or theory of moral values or principles. So, like, of course, we have principles of ethical norms, and like in social regulating, but in the position of medical talking, we should talk about medical ethics. If we try to understand what does medical ethics mean, we should say that it's a system of moral principles that applied values and judgments to the practice of medicine. And as a scholarly discipline, medical ethics encompasses its practical application in clinical settings as well as work in its history, philosophy, and sociology. Of course, one of the first was Hippocratic Oath, like medical ethics positions. After that, of course, there were much more regulations. We can talk about the first code of medical ethics, which was called Formula Committees Acciatrorum, and it was also published in the 15th century, but already after Domini. After that, a lot of countries created rules in their own way with their own historical situations, and depending upon the country, depending upon the legal system, of course, there were some varieties of this regulation, like in Islamic scholarships, for example, or in Orthodox schools, and so on. The next step of regulation of moral and medical ethics was in 18th and 19th centuries. Medical ethics emerged as a more self-conscious discourse. The most powerful regulation was in England. It was created by Thomas Percival. He was a physician and author who created a modern code of medical ethics. So, of course, after that there were a lot of acts which regulated this situation in 18th century and 19th century, mostly in America and in some European countries. But anyway, nowadays we have a lot of different international norms which regulate previous moral rules in a new way, like legal norms, and those norms are written in international legislation. Of course, most of them are created like common principles, such as for example, autonomy, beneficence, and so on. If we look through the international legislation, we can find four main principles, which was created by Tom Bishop and James Childress. They wrote about them in the textbook Principles of Biomedical Ethics. They said that these four principles are more common and more important, the most important, one through others. Of course, there can be more principles in other books, but these one are the most important. So, of course, it's not like four main. We'll talk about more, and I'll tell you first of all about four main, those which were published by the authors I named before. So the first one is respect to autonomy. It means that patients has the right to refuse or choose their treatment, not depending upon the will or upon the thoughts of the doctor. The next one is beneficence. So it means practitioner a practitioner should act in the best interest of the patient, like any of the doctors or medical workers, it doesn't matter which ones. Next one is non-maleficence. It means not to be the cause of the harm, and of course you know about it. It's like one of those principles which are also we talk about in a Hippocratic Oath. And the last one is justice. It means that concerns to the distribution of scarce health resources and the decision of who gets the treatment, any people is equal. Of course, we can talk about other principles such as respect to the person, truthness and honesty, and others, which are also very important, but not of them written in different international norms. So, as you see, talking about different norms, we can find out different principles of ethical behavior and of this part of health law. Going to the next part, we should say that health law, it's the law that became intimately involved in medical practice just in the 20th century. So you see, it's not very old part of law and law type. So historical legal medicine or forensic medicine was a field devoted exclusively to the use of medicine in the courtroom, primary in two settings: forensic pathology and forensic physiatry. But nowadays, of course, this dividing is much more contract, so we have more different types and sides of regulation. So, one of the most modern changes was that since 1960s, the legal climate changed drastically, because civil lawsuits alleging medical malpractice have become a fact of professional life of many physicians. Issues formerly regarded to ethics, such as abortion and termination of medical treatment, also have become important civil rights issues in courtrooms across the world, as have issues of informed consent and patients' rights. So you see, the point from which we go is the point that legal regulation of those relations, I mean the situation when they created the certain norms of regulation, was the very important point in which a new line of regulation and new line of the history of health law was created. So, if we'll talk about health law in a rather modern and rather wide understanding, we should say that in the Florida bar, there is a very good definition of it, and it says that health law is legal issues involving federal, state, or local laws, rules, or regulations, and healthcare providers issues, regulation of providers, legal issues regarding relationships between and among providers, legal issues regarding relations between providers and payers, and legal issues regarding the delivery of healthcare services. So, as you can see here, we have a big list of relations which are in health law regulation. And so we can say that the area of health law is very wide. So if we'll go, for example, to the areas of health law, we can say that usually they divide it in 4 parts. So, in 4 areas. First one is healthcare law. So, it's focused on treatment. The second part is public and population health law. It's focused on preventions. The third part is bioethics, and the fourth part is global health law. So, as you see, there are 4 big areas of regulation in different parts of international health law. Of course, we can say that in every country it's a very close system which divides health law on different parts, one on treatment, another on bioethics, the third one maybe about some other special actions, and so on. So if we talk about the next point, it will be about the basic terms and about basic understanding. So the terms legislation and law are used to refer generally the statutes, regulation, and other legal instruments. In other words, like minister decrees. And those minister decrees may be forms of law used in the certain country. In generally, there are a wide range of regulatory statutes and might be used to ensure people's health and safety. They tried to find the word for the term for this meaning, but actually nowadays there are no certain term. Usually they say that it's like a responsive regulation. And this term involves using mechanisms that are responsive to the certain context, conduct, culture of those being regulated, providing for a range of regulatory mechanisms to achieve a behavior desire. So, like, is like there's an aim, a certain aim or goal for this certain way, and this way is insensitive before sanctions. So to behave in that way, not to be under punishment. Talking about those strategies, we can divide them in 5 groups. The first group is volunteerism, so it means voluntary compliance undertaken by an individual organization. The way of regulation and the way of organization working in hospitals. The next one is self-regulation, so regulating the behavior of members through a voluntary code of practice. like creating rules for medical workers, like from the uniform till the working periods and the documentation which they should give. So the next one, economic instruments. Using an example in this situation, we can say about supply and funding sanctions or incentives for healthcare providers and or demand-side measures that give more power to consumers. Special rules for regulating the use of medicines, of pills, and for example using drugs or something like that. So the next one is meta-regulation, involving an external regulatory body to ensure that healthcare providers implement safety and quality practice and programs. So the level of the knowledge of medicals. And the last one is command and control mechanisms. So it means involving enforcement by the government, the regulation of the government or the certain system. Talking to the next part, we should go to medical law, and first of all to its term. First of all, we should say that medical law is the body of laws concerning the rights and responsibilities of medical professionals and their patients. The main areas of focus for medical law include confidentiality, negligence, and other torts related to medical treatment, especially like medical, for example, malpractice, and criminal law and ethics. About ethics, we already talked with you a bit earlier. As you understand, the regulation of medical law should be on two levels. First level is country level, and the second one is international level. To use the norms of international level, the deals between countries about medical regulation and about medical norms. They should first create this document and use the procedure of ratification. It means that the country, that leaders agree with the norms of this law act and will use it on the territory of this country. So if we talk about some of international laws, we can talk, for example, about different laws, such as, for example, ABA. It's in another way called healthcare law. We can talk about health information privacy, the special document which regulate the norms about the information of patients. Next one, which most of countries use, is Patient Safety and Quality Improvement Act, which regulates the way of behavior with the patient in different situations, like in a hospital, during his being in a hospital, and during the operations and so on. It's a very big act. The next one, health information privacy. Oh, sorry, it's doubled. The next one is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. In a short way, it's called HIPAA. I'll repeat, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So also the act about certain regulation, most of them about certain regulation, of course. Also, we can talk about local regulations. For example, in Russian Federation we can use rule of privacy of consumer financial information, the special norms which say that the information can't be given to another person, information about the patient and its health. For example, we can talk about fair credit responsibility. It also regulates the norms of the work of medicals. Also, we can talk about criminal code, which says about the responsibility of doctors. It's, for example, in Russian Federation, in every country there are a lot of legal norms which regulate the way of behavior with patients and the way of work with patients and the regulation of work of medicals, of course. So in these acts, as already told, we can divide them in 4 main areas. Now let's talk a bit about these areas. And the first one is confidentiality. This idea is worldwide popular in most effects, in international also, and every country regulates it in its own documents. So it says that medical doctors and mental health professionals have long had a tradition of confidentiality with their patients dating back to the English common law. This rule was created rather long ago, and English common law was the first which created the precedent of using this regulation. But however, this tradition has been codified in recent years so that anything said by the patient to a doctor or mental health professionals in the course of diagnosis or treatment is privileged and confidential unless the individual expresses and imminent intentions to harm himself or others. For example, in Russian Federation, the doctor can have criminal punishment in the case the information will go to other people which are not doctors also. This idea is written in one of the most popular and important medical acts, international medical acts, in Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It was reinforced and explained there. This law was designed to deal with a number of issues pertaining to the increasingly mobile and connected nature of our and others' culture, and created a number of legal safeguards. So this act created a number of new formal requirements about disclosures, ways in which information can be exchanged, and keeping patients' information confidential. Those who violate this act can be face significant liability. So you see, this information, even in a professional way, can't be given to anyone, can be given to some experts in the certain area, or it can be given just to those people which is allowed it by the individual about which this information was gathered. Okay, I think that about confidentiality is everything clear. So let's go to next one, is negligence and other torts. And in this part we should say that those diagnoses and treating others as a profession are held to a higher standard than a passerby on the street who render aid. It means that to have your own doctor practice, to be a well-known and legally working medical, you should have the certain standards of education. So, as you can see, medical malpractice is one of the key focus of medical law and relates to the liability of a medical professional for negligence in the diagnosis or treatment of patient resulting in injury or death. But as you understand, other thoughts do cross over into the field of medical law. So, for example, it's possible for a medical profession to defame a patient if they wrongfully disclosed untrue information about the patient's health. So, of course, you're not the person who can read through the thoughts of the patient, and you use just those information which is given to you from the patient. But as very famous Dr. House said, people lie, so of course you should check all the information or find out why it was said in such a way. For another example, it's a battery when one performs a treatment in someone but has declined such treatment. Usually it can be in, for example, religious way, in religious reason. So the person don't want to use special pills or don't want to do the operation, and this way he should sign the document with the note that he do it in his own way and in his own will. So in this case, doctor which did all the right things will be free from the responsibility. There are a number of other possible torts as well. So if you're a medical professional concerned about limiting your exposure, you should contact an attorney who can review your practice and advise you about how best to reduce your liability profile. So as you see, those negligence and torts, they are for better working of the medical workers. So the next one part is crime and ethics. About ethics, we already talked with you rather more, so we don't look at it in a more contract way here. But about crime, criminal law and social ethics have taken a very large role in medical law in recent years, especially in most countries in which criminal law has line to modernization or making it better. So the rise of so-called pull mills have raised issues about the role of medical professionals in the trafficking of controlled substance, both from a criminal and the ethical standpoint. Another example can be the situation included famous cases involving the euthanasia of terminally ill patients and sexual assurance against anesthetized patients. So it means that, of course, some medicals are not very ethical behaved, and not just in a way when they are rude, but in the way when patients can do nothing, and some of doctors become thinking that they're some kind of god or they're some kind of judges. In this case, of course, it will be crimes. In most countries, in criminal codes or in criminal regulation, there are special norms which say about such situations, or norms are closed for such conditions that they can be used in such a possible way. So, one of the main documents of medical working and medical law is Convention to the Protection of Human Rights and Dignity of the Human Being with regard to the application of biology and medicine. So, to say about this document, it is very, very important. We should say, first of all, that it's an international instrument aimed to prohibit the mimesis of innovations in biomedicine and to protect human dignity. So the convention was opened for signature in 1997 for countries, different countries. It was in Oviedo in Spain, and that's why this convention is also known as Oviedo Convention. Usually they use name for the conventions from the cities which they were created, signed, or took their legal power. So the international treaty is a manifestation of the effort on the part of the Council of Europe to keep pace with the developments on the field of biomedicine. So, generally, this convention, by the way, I should say that the convention was opened for signature in 1997, but it entered in force just in 1999, in the December of 1999. So you see, 2.5 years they needed to sign it to ratify, to regulate all the norms and so on. In this convention, we can find general principles for regulating most of medical law actions. This convention provides a framework structure to preserve human dignity comprehensively across the field of bioethics. Talking about general principles. The general provision of Oviedo Convention outline the object and the purpose of this instrument. The aim to assure the dignity of human being within the field of biomedicine. So, several principles of this convention are adopted in order to achieve this main goal of the convention. Embodied to the field chapter to the convention, the principles relate to the primacy of the human being, and also is used to equitable across to healthcare, and also some professional standards. The first one principle is the consent. So the issue of consent is pivotal to the convention because of the relationship it has to individual autonomy. It means so that content or that the consent must be free and fully informed. Free and informed consent is based on objective information. So protection is afforded to those not able to consent, and provision is made for emergency situations. Actually, this information is written in article part of this convention, and also we should say that specific rules must be observed where any medical intervention is carried out in any situation where a person is not able to give free information consent. So you see, this one principle is one of the most important and gives the patients lots of powers and possibilities to work with. So the next two principles is private life and rights to information. As we already talked about it a bit higher, we talked about the right to privacy. This norm is in the Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights. So the scope of the right encompasses individuals' entitlement not to know, as well as the right to know information regarding their health, interest of the patient, and the society may lead to a restriction of either phase of the right. It means that private life and private information is one of the most important and can be given to other people. So the next one is human genome. In the convention, we have the information about the incorporates provision to across a concerned relation to research into the human genome, focusing on honest, honored, or behavior with genetic testing, the storage of genetic data and modification of human genome. Also the documentation which is needed for it. Genetic testing as a tool for discrimination is prohibited under Article 11 and Article 12. The overarching them is that genetic testing is received for health-related purposes is the main idea and the only way of their using. So it's about human genome. Let's go to the next one, is scientific research. It says about the freedom of scientific research of embodied in the convention, in chapter 5 of this convention. However, precedence is afforded to the protection of human dignity and other fundamental freedoms. Therefore, the freedom of research is qualified. First of all, research carried out on human being is under strict controls set through the convention, and the general rules on consent must be observed in the context of research. So you see, making the research of any of lines or any of sides is the action which should be is in totally legal and free way. So it means that nobody can push to use not certified pills or nobody can push to be cut in parties in a case he doesn't want, even after his death. So, and the last one, I'm sorry, I don't have the picture of it, it's very strange. The organ and transplantation, it's also close to scientific research, but in this case, in convention, we talk about provides to the general rules that living donors of organs transplanted are only to be utilized if there is no ability of organs from the deceased person. It means that for using organs and for transplantation, there should be special agreement of the patient, or he should put a sign about it in his medical book or certificate. So, as you see, medical health is rather wide and important part of legislation in any country, and especially in the world, which regulates most of main principles in medical legal regulation. But of course, depending upon the country, there are a special list of norms, a special group of norms which are regulated in a more context way, because in international documents there are very common understanding of regulation, and sometimes it can be used in informal or not right way. So for today, it's the all information I wanted to give you. I hope everything was clear and understandable. If you have questions, you can ask me or your another teacher on the practice lessons. Thanks for your attention, and goodbye for today. Have a good day. Bye bye.